So a lot of you already said it. It's our ability to persevere, ability to overcome, keep going, steer through. So when you get a no, how can you turn that no into a yes? The ability to adapt, to modify to suit needs, make adjustments, make improvements. So how do we adapt to a change of climate, for example, with COVID? What types of adaptations do we need to do in the school or in our community? And some of you already said bounce back. So ability to find a way to move on. So despite all odds, despite difficulties, how do we get back up and move forward?
Yeah. Thank you. I just remember what someone said before, and said resilience is whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It just got stuck in my head, and I think that's so true.
Yes.
We have a different version, like Dr. Kumar explained, and that what she just showed us just the general definition, and that's been on for years, and that's what researchers have found out. But in recent time, and that's recent in 2019, in the research on resilience, there's now a new definition, and this is advancing despite adversity. And this is by a group of researchers. They're called Driven, and they come from a variety of career, from neuroscience, technology, psychology. They all came together and they were doing research on what resilience really means, both physically and mentally, and for young people and adults and children. And they came up with this modern definition, and to them, it means advancing despite adversity. And this really resonates with us because when we look at our new normal today, despite the pandemic, we're still moving on. And that's what resilience really means. And it's mean also setting goals, setting your vision for the future and working towards it. And not only that, being proactive, just like when the pandemic, we're not waiting for solution or how to cure it all, that we keep moving on and we keep putting guidelines and protection and safety guidelines in place to keep us safe from it. And that's what they mean by advancing despite adversity. And adversity could be anything. It could be small, it could be big, but as far as you're moving on, you're not stuck with it, you keep moving, and that's the modern definition of it. I just thought I'll share that with you. I know you agree with me that right now in the middle of the pandemic, our kids are actually showing us that. And a school showing us that, a city, it's a global collaboration because it's the first time that we're really impacted together globally by an adversity such as this. So now I'm going to move on to an example of what it is, because often we say it's bouncing by, it's moving on, but sometimes it has to do with failure. As you know, Jordan, he's a well-known popular basketball player. Actually, just watching on his video, he's failed 10,000, thousands of times, and he said the failure is what has actually helped him trying to read his code. He said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times my team have trusted me to take the game, to take the winning shot, but I missed. I have failed over and over in my life, but that's why I succeed. So failure, so there's that argument about failure and resilience. But failing doesn't really mean that we're not resilient. That's just the point that we're trying to make, that we're going to fail, but it's that ability to keep moving on despite the failure. So the measure of success is how many times we are able to bounce back despite the failure. Okay, and now we're going to look at frameworks. So most framework that's been developed in the past about resilience, they always say it's a collaboration. It can't happen in just one area. It has to be all of us, a whole village doing it together. So apart from the fact that we have to keep advancing, we have to work together. And so that will include families, that's parents, caregiver, grandpa, grandma, everyone working together. And the school also has a big role to play in elevating resilience, because we have to be on the same page with the parent, and our neighborhood and community also have a role to play. What kind of neighborhood we set for the kids, what's accessible, what's not accessible, and even how we view our children as a community. Those are all the things that can impact how we're building resilience or how we're diminishing it. And then our society as a whole, at large, do we see building it as important? Are we making policies that will help kids to elevate resilience and continue to move on? Do we have all the resources in place to support children? So all of us have a role to play. And that's what the framework is. But then I noticed, just when we were doing the research, and I was talking to Dr. Kumar about this as well, that I feel like there's still something missing in this framework. And so I decided to create my own. And this is what it looks like. And for me, I think it's centering the kids, like they're in the center. As family, as community, as school, as a society, it's centering them, making them a priority and a focus, because these are our future. These are the generation that comes after us, right? They're the next generation. So I think it's centering them, and then we're all playing our role in supporting them. But most importantly, we're building quality, safe, healthy, trustworthy relationships with them. Because when those kind of relationships are not in place, it's harder to say you want to elevate resilience in anybody, even as us, when you're not in the right space where you feel safe, where you feel comfortable, even just to share your challenges or how you're feeling, then it will be difficult to build it. And also the type of environment that we create, the type of environment that we expose our children to, also has a crucial role to play in whether we build it, we elevate it or not. Because it's important that in whatever environment we create for the future, which is our children, whatever environment we create, we have to ensure that they feel safe in there. They feel supported, they feel valued, they feel comfortable, and it's a safe place to learn and to grow. So I think those parts are missing. So I created this framework, which is now my baby that I'm working on in terms of research, and I hope to develop it further. And the only thing that I add is each one of us, whether it's a school, the society, community, families, we must have a good relationship with our children before we can build their resilience. And we must create the right environment for them to succeed. So what I think is why I pass it on to you, Miss. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were going, so we'll, you know what, do you want to skip this question for sake of time? Okay, we'll skip this question for sake of time, and then maybe we'll come back to it at the end.
Okay.
So we'll just go to the next slide.
Okay.
So you're all here today because at the core of the decisions as a parent, as a caregiver or guardian, you want to know, how can I protect my child from hurt, disappointment, humiliation, change, unpredictability? And that's often very primal and instinctual of parents to want to do that for their children. The reality is you can't go with your child, especially for all of you who say you have teenagers or kids in high school. We can't be there for every single obstacle that our children face. choice. And we absolutely can't remove every obstacle, and nor should we. So I know sometimes as parents, we have the tendency to want to solve our kids' problems. We want to talk to the principal or talk to a teacher and try to resolve things for them so that they can be protected from that shame and hurt or humiliation. But what we're going to talk about today is 10 ways that you can impart those skills to your children so that they can face those challenges themselves. These are research-driven techniques that psychologists use and other people use to make sure that we have stronger, more resilient students. So we'll start with the first one, which is the next slide. So the first one is building strong, healthy relationships. This is very tricky because it's hard work. Building strong relationships is not easy. We all know that. Like, I think Thanksgiving was just around the corner. We're meeting all of our family members and realizing this is hard. This is hard work, but we do need to invest in those relationships for our children and for ourselves. A lot of the research shows that people who are the most resilient, that face fewer mental health problems, are the ones that have a full circle of people that they can depend on and people that they've invested in, and they've made things work despite difficulties. So, teaching our kids that we don't just shut people out, shut family out and teachers out when things go wrong. How do we resolve that? So one thing I like to do with students is, and this you can do this with your own child, to get an idea of who their circle is. So draw a circle with your child and ask them to put names of people, or draw, if they're younger, who is in their circle. Who do they think from their perspective is in their corner, is there for them? It may surprise you. It may not be that beloved aunt or beloved grandparent that you were hoping to see in that circle. And why? Let's explore our children's perception of who's in their circle so that we can make that circle bigger. So kids that feel like they have a big circle with lots of people in their corner, teachers, neighbors, they tend to do better. They tend to suffer from fewer mental health problems. So that's where the first piece that we would like to help support families build relationships. The second one, so moving to the next slide, is communication. So how do we listen to our kids? How do we talk to our kids so that they'll share more? There is a specific science in this. So a lot of parents will tell me, oh, I'll ask my kid what they're doing at school and they say nothing, or it was good. And then that doesn't really give you a lot of information to build on and to work with them. And you're certainly not being invited into their world to be able to start that dialogue. So one thing, kids are naturally very competitive. When you share your day of what you learned, what some of the obstacles were, who you talked to, what some new things that you learned at work, you share that with your kid, you'll be surprised of how much more they start to open up and share about their day. Another thing that parents can do is ask very specific questions about their day. So instead of saying, like, how was your day at school? One nice sort of verbal phrase that you can use is, tell me something hilarious that happened at school today. And then they may say, oh, the teacher did this and we all laughed. And it's a way for you to get inside their world and make those connections every single day with your child. And even if it's 5-10 minutes, it's very busy. A lot of you are working from home or working outside of the home. It's not easy to make time for this. The other important piece is validating their feelings. Now, one thing we often work with parents on is understanding that validation does not equal agreeing. So often our kids will say things that we just quite frankly think are outlandish or we don't think there's any proof for, but we can't convey that because they're not going to tell us as much if we convey that type of skepticism in what they're saying. So a good example is maybe our child's come home and said, oh, kids were leaving me out at school and they're really upset by this. Sometimes a natural tendency for a parent is to sort of protect that child, or it's uncomfortable for them to think that their child could be left out at school. So they either can go in like protective mama bear or papa bear or guardian bear mode and try to solve the problem for that child, or they can, it's so uncomfortable that they kind of brush it under the rug. They say, no, they're not leaving you out. I saw you play with Fiza the other day. Don't worry about it. So it's how do we talk to our kids so that we're avoiding those two things, not trying to be overprotective and solve the problem for them, and also not trying to tell them that that feeling was not true. So maybe another way to approach it is, tell me what happened at school that made you feel like you were being left out. I'd love to hear, or, you know, something along those lines to get them to open up. So there are very specific ways of asking questions that allow for conversation. So another one is not asking children yes or no questions, things that they can literally just say yes or no or not. Try to ask more open-ended questions for the communication.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that,
Yeah.
as we all know, we're still in the middle of pandemic. It's getting better. We're happy about that. But, you know, and you agree with me, it's really a hard time. It's a hard time for kids. It's a hard time to be a kid right now because we're taking a lot away from them. And you have to social distance, wear mask all the time, give hands to yourself, can socialize. So it's a good time just to ask them, how are you feeling about all of this?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, so they can let you know. It's good to talk about things like that as well, because they do think about it and they worry about it. So communication, those are some of the things you can put on the table and just talk casually and support them in any way and listen and validate their feeling and say, we're all in this together. I'm here to support you. Be a significant support system. It's very crucial at this time for all our children. I just wanted to add that.
I love that. That's a great thing to check in on for sure. So the next we talk about is emotions. This is really, the research shows that the more we explain to children that all emotions are acceptable, that they don't need to control their emotions, that these emotions will come and go in waves. And it's really what they do with the emotion that we're hoping that they have some sort of grapple on, right? So if you're frustrated, angry, embarrassed, that's all normal things to feel, and that we shouldn't be shutting kids to not want to express those emotions. It's again, what skill set do they use to handle those big emotions? So really getting at that, emotions are like clouds, they're always changing, and those emotions will pass. So the more we teach our kids to sit with uncomfortable emotions, and it's important that we don't fear them, we don't push them away, the better we're going to be able to deal with that emotion when it comes back. So the one quote here is if you, oh gosh, I can never read it properly. If you're gonna win, no.
How are you going to win when you end right within?
Exactly. So there's so many different meanings towards that. I should know that it's a song. I just, for some reason, was blanking. So really, there's many meanings to that. One you can think of is if you're the first one to emotionally break down in front of your kids and not know what to do with it, then that's also not going to be the best role model. But then also you can't help. You can't be there to help the other kids. So, you know, having the emotions, but being able to really put them on the table and work with them is in working on those emotions yourself. So if you're a really anxious person, it's really important that you work on those skills, because your kids are not going to learn how to deal with those stressors unless we as parents show them that we're working on those emotions as well. So basically helping yourself before you help your child, I think, is a very important point. So the next thing that a lot of research shows, so we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, is all around growth mindset. There is another workshop that is going deeper into this, talking about the power of yet and growth mindset. This is huge. Schools have really caught on in the last, I'd say, decade or so, how important it is for our students to realize that they can learn. The power of yet really being, you know, not telling students not to say, I'm not good at math, and always adding, I'm not good at math yet. So getting kids to understand the more the effort they put into things, the more they try, their brains can change and can grow. One thing as parents, what we can do is, like, if we think about this pandemic and being at home with our kids, we've all made mistakes. We've all maybe lost our temper, got frustrated, maybe been physical and really deeply regretted it after. We've all been there, right? Whether it's not from the pandemic or other stressors in our life, made some poor judgments with our children. Naming that mistake, taking accountability for it, and modeling that you can repair with your child and you can repair in those relationships. I know it's uncomfortable, but the more we do this in front of our children and show that we are human, we make mistakes, and holding ourselves accountable for, our children are really going to understand that growth mindset. And they're going to know that when things go wrong, I can repair it because my parent and I repaired it. So that's a very powerful thing that we can teach. Another thing, some parents may laugh at me when I say this, but depending on the age of your child, sometimes kids think that their parent can do no wrong. They really idolize their parent. And it's a very hard thing for them to understand that, a parent can be loving and nurturing and supportive, but also be the same person that hurts them so deeply, that can say things that, and it's hard for them to let both of those exist at the same time. So another reason why we do want to name our mistakes and explain that, we can be both sometimes. So next, we are going to look at promoting optimism. Studies have shown that we are naturally, as humans, hardwired for negativity. We pay more attention to negativity as we try to make sense of the world. Because of this bias, it's really important to train the mind to take in all information. So just because we are in chaos or in a stressful situation, doesn't mean we block out all of the positivity in our world, because that's what our brain naturally wants to do. But we have to be really sort of outsmart and trick our brain into thinking, no, that's not actually true. And what's really important in this, when we work with parents and children on this concept, we are in no way trying to turn bad thoughts into happy-go-lucky hot thoughts. That is not what this slide is about. It's allowing both things to exist, and being more fair to the fact that there is both out in the world, and not shutting out all the positive just because, again, you're in crisis. So another way to look at it is when you're calm and relaxed, you notice the blue sky. You look up and you're like, oh, look at that beautiful blue sky. Now, life is tricky. There's always going to be clouds, sometimes storm, and sometimes dark clouds that are terrifying, but we can't lose sight of that blue sky because it's always going to be there. It may just take some time for the clouds to roll away and the storm to pass, but the blue sky is what we've always been looking for, and it will always still be there. And then we'll go on to, this is the biggest one for me. As a psychologist, I work with kids around this a lot, because like I said, around change and unpredictability, a lot of the times children I work with that have the most difficulty in this area also suffer from more mental health problems, anxiety, depression, or difficulties with interpersonal relationships, because it is hard for them to accept change and to accept uncertainty. So basically what this slide is getting at of what we need to teach our children is, if every time we encountered any type of uncertainty or change, we find ourselves panicking or resisting it in some way, we're not actually giving ourselves or our child a chance to improve their ability to navigate change and uncertainty. So the key is, how do we sit with that very uncomfortable, uncertain feeling rather than pushing it away, avoiding it, or shutting it out? So being familiar with uncertainty is a skill that will help us, because the reality is uncertainty is going to come knocking on our door even after COVID. Like, if there is an after all this, there will be more uncertainty in our lives, right? Either with our health or our relationships, with our jobs. And the better we get at it really is the key to how to be resilient. And we'll move to the next slide, please.
Yeah, I just want to add to that one of the change happening now for children is, I know the uncertainty, like you mentioned, is you never know where you're going when you're going virtual. Like, so they're like, you can be in contact with someone who's positive and all of a sudden you're going virtual. So that's a huge change, and one way, and sometimes students panic, and one way to build that resilience to let them, you've done this before. We did
Yes.
it last year. We've done it before. It's going to be okay. And most kids are really great at this, and the educator, they know how to do that transition. It just goes smoothly, and we're back to online. So just something to put out there, and a good, great discussion to have with kids.
Actually, yes, sorry, I'm gonna add another thing too. You just reminded me, I forgot to say, I love that you said that you've been here before. It's kind of like if we were to say to our kids again, or our students, we're going virtual, that feels like a dark cloud. It feels like a dark cloud all of a sudden, and it's
Yeah.
that dark cloud's gonna stay there, and it's very scary. But that too will pass, and we will see blue sky. One of the things that I like to work with students and my own children, I use nature as the best teachers of change and unpredictability. So if we look at our conceptualization of resiliency, which is really using our tree as our metaphor, the tree does not resist the changes of the season. It does not say, I do not want my leaves to fall and hang on to those leaves for dear life. It says, I accept this change, that my leaves will fall. And in spring, I accept that it will bloom. And that root system that we build with our children, when it is an intricate, healthy root system that's strong, regardless of the storm that comes to hit that tree, it will still be standing. Yes, some branches may fall, some leaves may fall, some changes may occur in the tree, but that root system that we provide by using some of these concepts and research of how we can instill resiliency is what's going to help our students and our children to still stand after that storm.
Yeah, thank you. Very true.
So this around building executive functioning skills, a lot of times, I know with COVID and lockdowns and online schooling, one thing parents have had a lot of struggle with is how to establish routines at home. Now that a lot of us are back in person learning, the school is doing a fantastic job of establishing routines for your child, giving them connections and allowing them to have creative play and movement and exercise outdoors and at recess. I think the important point here is how can you implement more of that at home? So in an unpredictable world where there is a lot of chaos and uncertainty, when you establish routines and provide those opportunities, what you're doing is you're sort of grounding them in some level of certainty, right? So you as a parent or a teacher who provides this to students, that is their little safe certainty piece, because nobody likes a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty. It doesn't sit well with us unless you're, again, years of meditation, and you're just in a different space, you can really handle a lot of that, but most kids can't. It's very uncomfortable for them. So by doing these things for your child, you're grounding them. So we'll go to the next one. So this one is kind of like what I was talking about before. When I say build sense of competence and confidence, it's really, we try to protect our kids so much from adversity, right? We try to arrange social situations or maybe try to solve problems for them, when the reality is we need to give them some sort of confidence and competency that we think they can do it on their own. So when we try to do too much for our kid, what we're inadvertently, you're not doing it on purpose, but what we're telling that child is you don't have the skill set. You don't have the resilience in you to do this on your own. So as your children get older, obviously depending on your age of your child, I'm more speaking about teenagers or young, like preteens, that we do need to sort of give them the more of that independence to think and solve problems on their own. And that you're telling them, I think you're capable of handling this stress. I don't need to take on this stress for you. That's a very powerful message to send to our children. Yes, I'm done with that one, unless you have anything to add.
Okay, thank you so much. And now also the next one's about promoting mental health and well-being, and really truly promoting mental health is the same as promoting resilience. They both work together, right? They both work together. And mental health involves our ability to act and to think and to interact to interact with people in ways that allows us to enjoy our life and to cope with challenges. And so when we're not there, it's very difficult to resist, to adapt, to persevere, and to keep advancing in adversity if we're not there mentally and if our well-being is not healthy. So some of the things we could do is to reduce stress, avoid it, try to reduce it by all means. Sleep, rest, those are things we have to make sure we're doing and ensure that our kids are doing as well, that they're resting and they're having enough sleep. And another thing is to work with them to co-create agreements that will help them to deal with whatever challenges they're having. Remember, we talk about communication. Now they've let you know how they're feeling. They've shared with you challenges that they're having. Something you could do is to co-create a plan or solution or some kind of agreement with them to deal with those problems. And I just use a picture of the river. Like we know rivers keep flowing, right? And it's going through hurdles and challenges, ups and downs, but it never stops flowing and it's so calm at the same time. So and just sharing with our kids that life, that's life, and we go through all these challenges and hurdles, but we have to keep going and holding them accountable. You know, when you co-create those plans, you want to hold them accountable. Did we say we're going to do this? We have structures, we have routine. Did we follow them? Those are the kind of things that can help them to stay stable and well balanced in terms of mental health and well-being. Exercise is a good one, like Dr. Kumar just mentioned, just movement and creative play, giving them opportunity to be active. And again, creating that safe environment that makes them feel comfortable to share, makes them comfortable to express how they're feeling. When they're hurting, we want to restore, we want to build them back up. And we can always ask, how can I do this? So it's very important that we promote their mental health and well-being to elevate resilience. And the next one is about highlighting their strength and their greatness. Every child has a strength. They're great in one way or the other. So we figure out the strength and use the strength-based approach. And this is something also we're pushing in school to focus on the strength of the kids. So as parents, we should be doing that at home. You imagine how great it would be for kids to hear their own parent telling them how great they are, highlighting areas of strength that they have, reinforcing their character strength, seeing the good in them. Those are things that kids really want, and it helps them to continue to build that resilience because you're acknowledging what they have and you're using their strength to solve whatever problem they have or to meet their needs in any area. Also focusing on the present instead of the absent. And what I mean by that is that we're dealing with the issue at hand, whatever it is that the child is going, you're dealing with that issue at the present, not what's past, not what they've done in the past that is bad, but you're just dealing with what's happening right now, what challenges happening, and what strength they have that will help them to overcome it. So it's important that we highlight, we let kids know how good they are. It's coming from a teacher or a parent. It's always awesome, and it's this. They feel much more elevated, and it helps in building their resilience as well. And the next one is developing the attitude of gratitude. So we highlight how great they are, but also we're going to want to teach them how to be grateful for the blessings around them. And I really like this quote by Carr. You can choose to look at the thorns, or you can choose to look at the roses. They're all the paradox, like they all grow together. Well, it's a choice, right? Because we can complain if we're just looking at the turns, we just keep complaining. But if we can shift our mindset to look at the roses, then we see the good in what's happening around us. And this is not to say that we have to minimize issue, but we have to kind of balance it so that we know, yeah, we have challenges here, we're not minimizing. But again, we want to look at the good side of what's happening, the blessings that we have. And I think it's important for us to make it a daily practice for our children to look around them and look at the good things around them, the blessings around them, not only during Thanksgiving weekends, but like a daily practice. Because when kids see that, it helps build their resilience. Because then, okay, it's not that bad, like this quote says, by Rochelle, says that gratitude doesn't change the scenery, not really, but it washes the glass so that you can see clearly. So I think it's important as well. We elevate greatness, we also elevate gratitude. They all go together. I think it helps build our resilience in our kids. And that's the 10 tips that we have for you, and we're right on time. We don't want to keep you waiting. So we're going to go to our conclusion, which is very important. Everything we said today, I know for some of you, they are reminders. You already know those things already. And for some of us, you've learned something. But we would really like you to share, any things that you've done at home with your kids, any practical tips that you have that you like to share with the parent. We would like you to share that in the chat as well. In conclusion, we just want to say that resilience is a journey. My journey is different from your journey, and depending on the age of the children, it will be different. It's a continuum, and we're all on a different spot on that continuum because it's personal. My lived experiences will impact the level of my resilience, just like you too. So what works for me may not work for you. What works for one person may not work for another. I think it's important that we say that. So if you need help in any way, make sure you seek for help. Don't be shy, don't be afraid. Look for experts that can support you, and they're always out there. At school, we do have people in the school that can support you. We have the guidance counselor, we have a psychologist, a social worker, child and youth workers that can help you. The school administrators can help you as well, and we can always direct you to the right people if we're not able to help you right away. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. But we would really appreciate if you could share some practical tips that you have that we have not mentioned today so others can learn from you. And also if you have any question, we will unpack your question. Thank you again for joining us.